Hello, and welcome back to the Best English Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and I'm so glad you've joined me now. We're embarking on a brand new journey together, a deep dive into the world of everyday conversations in English. This isn't just about memorizing phrases, it's about understanding the rhythm and soul of real day-to-day talk. Over the episodes, we'll build a solid foundation, starting from the very beginning. Now, in our first installment, we're going to tackle something that might seem simple on the surface, but is actually the most crucial part of any conversation: greetings and introductions. Think about it. This is the first impression you make. It's the handshake, the smile, the moment you transition from being strangers to being two people sharing a moment. Let's start with a little story. A few years ago, I was traveling in a small town in England, and I was a bit lost. I was standing on a street corner staring at my map with a very confused expression on my face. A woman, probably in her late 60s, walking a small dog, stopped and smiled at me. She didn't just walk past. She said, "Hello there, you look a bit lost. Can I help you?" Now, she could have just said, "Hi," and walked on. But her longer, more conversational greeting opened the door for a real connection. She didn't just ask if I needed help. She noticed my predicament first. That's a great example of a warm, human greeting. Instead of the basic, "Hello, how are you?" which is fine, but a bit robotic, she used a little bit of observation to make the greeting personal. So let's talk about those basic greetings first, and then we'll build on them. We all know hello and hi. Hello is a bit more formal, while hi is casual and friendly. You'd probably say hello to your new boss on the first day, but hi to your friend. Then we have good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. These are a fantastic way to greet someone because they're time-specific and show a bit more politeness. You can use them with anyone, from a shopkeeper to a close colleague. Remember, we typically use good morning until noon, good afternoon until about 5 or 6 p.m., and good evening after that. You might also hear people say morning as a quick, casual version of good morning. Now, what about the follow-up? The famous "how are you" is a classic for a reason, but the answer isn't always literal. In many English-speaking cultures, "how are you" is less of a question about your health and more of a conversational placeholder. A simple "I'm good, thanks, and you" is often the expected response. You don't need to launch into a 10-minute story about your terrible morning commute or your aching back. Save those details for when you're having a more in-depth conversation. But if someone asks you, "How are you?" and they sound genuinely concerned, like my neighbor who saw me struggling with my groceries, then a more detailed answer is appropriate. The key is to listen to their tone of voice and read the situation. Let's move on to some more dynamic greetings. "What's up?" or "What's new?" are very informal. You would use these with your friends or people you know well. If you hear this, you could respond with something like, "Not much, just getting some coffee. What about you?" or "Just the usual." "How's everything with you?" These are great for keeping the conversation flowing. Another common one is, "How's it going?" which is a bit more general and can be used in many situations. A good answer would be, "It's going well, thanks," or "Pretty good." After the greeting, we often move into introductions. This is where we learn a bit about the other person. The most basic introduction is, "My name is Sophia," or "I'm Sophia." If you're introducing yourself to someone new in a professional setting, you might add your title, like, "Hello, I'm Sophia, the new project manager," or "I'm Sophia, I work in the marketing department." When you meet someone new, it's also polite to say something like, "It's a pleasure to meet you," or "Nice to meet you." Imagine you're at a party and a friend introduces you to someone new. Your friend might say, "Sophia, this is Ben. Ben, this is Sophia." A simple response from you would be, "Hi Ben, nice to meet you." And Ben would probably say the same. But we can make this more interesting. After "nice to meet you," you can add a question to start the conversation. For example, "Nice to meet you, Ben. How do you know Sarah?" This immediately gives you something to talk about. It shows you're engaged and interested in the other person. Sometimes introductions can be a bit more complex. Let's say you're introducing two people to each other who you think have something in common. You could say, "Sarah, this is Mark. Mark is also a huge fan of vintage cars, just like you." Oh, this little extra detail is so helpful because it gives them an instant topic of conversation. It's like you're giving them a starter kit for their new friendship. Now, for a little practice, I want you to imagine a few scenarios with me. First, you're walking into a new class for the first time. The teacher is at the front of the room. What would you say to greet them? Maybe something polite and slightly formal, like, "Good morning, my name is Sophia. It's nice to meet you." Or perhaps you're at a cafe, and the person next to you drops their book. You pick it up for them. What would you say as you hand it back? A simple, "Oh, excuse me, I think you dropped this," is perfect. When they say "thank you," you can smile and say, "You're welcome. Have a good day." Let's try another one. You're at a networking event for your job. You see someone standing alone. How would you approach them? You could walk up and say, "Hi there. I don't think we've met. I'm Sophia. What brings you here?" This is a great way to start a professional conversation without being too forward. It's confident and welcoming. The key to all of this, whether you're greeting a stranger or introducing yourself, is to be genuine. The words are important, but your tone of voice, your smile, and your body language are what truly make the other person feel comfortable and engaged. So, as you go about your day, pay attention to the greetings you hear. How do people say hello? What do they say after "How are you?" Start noticing these little details, and you'll find it becomes much easier to join in. Now, we're building on that foundation and moving into the exciting world of small talk. Small talk gets a bad reputation sometimes, doesn't it? People think of it as awkward or pointless, but in reality, it's a social superpower. It's the gentle way we get to know someone, test the waters, and find common ground. It's the bridge from hello to "let's grab a coffee sometime." The key is to see small talk not as a chore, but as a mini adventure. Let me tell you about my friend, David. He's one of those people who can talk to anyone about anything. Once, we were in a huge crowded elevator, and it was completely silent and uncomfortable. Everyone was just staring at the numbers. David broke the silence by turning to the person next to him, a woman holding a large, colorful box, and said, "That looks interesting. Is that a cake you're carrying?" The woman laughed and said yes, it was for her colleague's birthday. Within seconds, a couple of other people in the elevator chimed in, offering birthday wishes. By the time the doors opened, the entire atmosphere had changed from awkward to friendly. David didn't have to talk about politics or philosophy. He simply used a small observational detail to start a pleasant conversation. So, how do we do that? We start with safe, neutral topics. The weather is a classic for a reason. It's universal, always changing, and doesn't require a lot of personal detail. You could say, "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" Or, "I can't believe how cold it's gotten. I'm ready for summer." Another great topic is the immediate environment. Like David, you can comment on something you both see. If you're at a conference, you could say, "That was a really interesting presentation on digital marketing, wasn't it?" If you're in a coffee shop, you might say, "This place is always so busy on a Monday morning." This helps you find a shared experience. After you've made that initial comment, the goal is to ask an open-ended question to keep the conversation moving. An open-ended question is one that can't be answered with a simple yes or no. For example, instead of asking, "Do you like the rain?" you could ask, "What do you like to do on a rainy day?" See the difference? The first question stops the conversation, but the second one invites the other person to share a little story or detail about themselves. Let's try a few more examples. Imagine you're at a party and you're talking to a new person. You could start with, "How do you know the host?" This is a great low-pressure question. They might say, "Oh, we used to work together." And you can follow up with, "That's cool. Where did you work?" This is a simple, natural progression. Another great one is to ask about their weekend plans. "Do you have anything fun planned for the weekend?" Or, on a Monday, "How was your weekend?" These questions show you're interested in them and their life outside of this specific moment. Now, a lot of people worry about running out of things to say. This is where listening and observation are crucial. The secret to good small talk is to listen for hooks. A hook is a detail in the other person's response that you can latch onto. For example, if someone says, "My weekend was great. I went hiking in the mountains with my family," don't just say, "That's nice." Listen for the hooks. Hiking, mountains, family. You could ask, "Oh, what part of the mountains did you go to?" Or, "I love hiking. What's your favorite trail?" Or even, "How old are your kids? Do they enjoy hiking?" See how each of those questions comes directly from what they just told you? It shows you were listening, and it makes them feel heard. Let's practice this. I want you to imagine you're at a networking event. You meet someone and they say, "I'm a graphic designer." What's a good open-ended question you could ask? Instead of, "Do you like your job?" which is a yes or no question, you could say, "What kind of projects are you working on right now?" This is a great way to learn more about their work and their passions. Or if they say, "I just moved to the city a few months ago," you could ask, "Oh, that's exciting. How are you finding it so far?" This shows empathy and gives them a chance to share their experience. The biggest mistake people make with small talk is forgetting the talk part. A good conversation is a two-way street. You need to ask questions, but you also need to share a little bit about yourself. If someone asks you a question, don't just give a one-word answer. Expand on it slightly. If they ask, "What brings you here?" you could say, "I'm here for the marketing workshop." "I'm really hoping to learn more about social media strategy." This gives them a hook to respond to and keeps the conversation flowing. In summary, small talk is about being present, observing your surroundings, and using open-ended questions to show genuine interest. It's not about having to be the funniest or most interesting person in the room. It's about being a curious and good listener. Next time you're in a situation where you need to make small talk, take a deep breath, look for a shared detail, and ask a simple, open-ended question. You might be surprised at the connections you make. Now, we're going to use those skills to tackle a topic that comes up constantly in real life, talking about work and studies. This is a huge part of our identity, and for many people, it's the first thing they want to know about you after your name. The goal here isn't just to list your job title or your major. It's about sharing your passion, your challenges, and your goals in a way that's engaging and easy for others to connect with. Let me tell you about a conversation I had at a family dinner. My cousin, Mark, had just started his first job as a software developer. When my aunt asked him what he did, he could have just said, "I write code." But instead, he said, "I'm a software developer, and right now I'm working on an app that helps people track their personal finances. It's really cool because I get to help people manage their money and feel more in control." By adding that little bit of extra detail, the purpose of his work, he made it so much more interesting. He didn't just talk about his job, he talked about its impact. This is a great model for all of us. So, let's break down how to talk about your work. Instead of just saying, "I'm an accountant," you could say, "I'm an accountant, and I help small businesses organize their finances so they can grow." See the difference? You're not just defining what you do. You're explaining why you do it. This opens the door for a much more interesting conversation. The other person might say, "Oh, my friend just started a small business and is struggling with that. What's your best advice?" Now you have a real conversation, not just an information exchange. If you're a student, the same principle applies. Instead of "I'm studying English," you could say, "I'm studying English because I want to become a high school teacher and inspire students to love literature." This shows passion and purpose, and it makes your studies feel more real and personal. You can also talk about a favorite class or a project you're working on. For example, "I'm taking a class on public speaking, and it's really challenging, but I'm learning so much about how to be a more confident speaker." When someone asks you about your work or studies, there are a few common ways to answer. For work, you might hear questions like, "What do you do for a living?" "Where do you work?" "Wow, what's your job like?" "How did you get into that field?" For studies, you might hear, "What are you studying?" "Where do you go to school?" "What's your major?" "Why did you choose that subject?" When you're the one asking the questions. Remember to use those open-ended questions we talked about last time. Instead of, "Do you like your job?" which can be awkward if they say no, try, "What's your favorite part of your job?" Or, "What's a typical day like for you?" These questions are positive and encourage the other person to share something good. Let's practice a bit. Imagine you're at a gathering, and a new person asks you, "What do you do?" If you're a graphic designer, you could say, "I'm a graphic designer. I create logos and branding for new businesses." It's really fun to help a new company find its visual identity. Or if you're a recent graduate, you might say, "I just graduated with a degree in biology, and I'm currently looking for a job in a lab. My dream is to work in conservation. Oder. Now, let's try it from the other side. You're talking to someone, and they've just told you they're a teacher. You could ask, "That's fantastic. What grade do you teach?" Or, "What's the most rewarding part of being a teacher?" Again, this shows genuine interest and keeps the conversation flowing in a positive direction. Remember, it's not just about the words. Your enthusiasm and genuine interest can make a huge difference. When someone is talking about their work or studies, a simple, "That sounds so interesting," or "Wow, I never knew that," can make them feel valued and heard. We've already covered the essentials: greetings, introductions, and talking about our professional lives. Now, we're going to dive into a topic that allows us to build even deeper connections. Talking about personal life, hobbies, and family. This is where you move beyond being just a colleague or an acquaintance and start to become a friend. It's about sharing a little bit of who you are outside of work or school. When we share our hobbies, our passions, and our families, we're inviting someone to see a more personal side of us, and that's a truly powerful way to connect. I remember once meeting a new neighbor, an elderly man who was often sitting on his porch. For weeks, we just exchanged quick hellos. One afternoon, I saw him working on a beautiful wooden birdhouse. I stopped and said, "That's a lovely birdhouse. Do you build them often?" He lit up. He told me he'd been doing woodworking for over 40 years, and he showed me all the different tools he used. This simple question about his hobby opened the door to a wonderful friendship. We talked about more than just birdhouses. We talked about his life, his family, and his experiences. So, how do we start these kinds of conversations? It often begins with questions about hobbies and free time. This is a great, low-pressure way to get to know someone. You can ask, "What do you like to do in your free time?" Or, "Do you have any hobbies?" If you already know they like something, you can be more specific, like, "I saw you have a new camera on social media. Are you into photography?" This shows you're paying attention and you're genuinely interested. When you're answering these questions, try to give a little more than a one-word response. If someone asks what you do for fun, you could say, "I really enjoy hiking. I love getting out into nature and finding new trails to explore." This is so much more interesting than just saying, "hiking." It gives the other person a detail to latch onto, a potential shared interest, or a new question to ask. They might say, "Oh, I love hiking too. What's your favorite trail around here?" Let's think about talking about family. This can be a more sensitive topic, so it's best to approach it gently. It's usually something that comes up naturally in conversation. You might hear someone say, "My sister is visiting this weekend," or "I have 2 kids who keep me very busy." A polite and safe way to follow up is to ask a general, open-ended question like, "Oh, that's nice. How old are your kids?" Or, "What does your sister do?" It's important to be respectful and not get too personal unless they seem comfortable sharing more. Avoid asking questions that might be sensitive, like, "Are you married?" unless the conversation has already reached a more intimate level. A better approach is to listen for cues. If they mention their partner, you could say, "How did you two meet?" Here are some common questions you might hear or use. Do you have any brothers or sisters? What do your parents do? Do you have a big family? How long have you been married? This one should be used with caution and only if the context is appropriate. When someone asks about your family, you can share what you feel comfortable with. I have one brother and he's a doctor in another city. Or, my parents are retired and they love to travel. It's okay to keep it simple and friendly. Let's practice a scenario. You're talking to a new colleague and they mention they just adopted a dog. This is a perfect opportunity to talk about hobbies or family. You could say, "Oh, that's great. What kind of dog is it?" And then, "I have a cat, and he's a bit of a troublemaker." This allows you to share a little about your own life and pets, creating a real connection. The key to all of this is genuine curiosity. People love to talk about what they're passionate about, whether it's their family or their favorite hobby. Your role is simply to provide a friendly, safe space for them to share. So far, we've learned how to greet people, make small talk, and share details about our work, studies, hobbies, and family. Now, we're moving into a slightly more nuanced area, talking about opinions and preferences. This is a skill that's vital for expressing who you are and for having more interesting, authentic conversations. Sharing your opinion is a way of showing your personality and engaging in a more meaningful way. But it's important to do it politely and respectfully, especially if you're talking about a sensitive topic or if you think the other person might disagree. I once had a colleague who loved to talk about movies, but he would always present his opinions as facts. He'd say things like, "That movie is the worst film ever made. There's no debate." It made it really difficult to have a conversation with him because you felt like you couldn't share a different point of view without starting an argument. On the other hand, another colleague would say, "I really didn't enjoy that movie. The acting just didn't work for me." See the difference? He used phrases like, "I really didn't enjoy," and "for me," which showed that this was his personal opinion, not a universal truth. This made it so much easier for me to say, "Oh, that's interesting. I actually loved the special effects, but I agree the acting could have been better." We could share our differing opinions without it turning into a disagreement. So, let's learn how to express your preferences politely. The key is to use hedging language, which softens your statements and makes them sound like personal opinions rather than absolute facts. Instead of saying, "Sushi is the best food," you could say, "I think sushi is the best food." Or, "In my opinion, sushi is the best food," or even, "I'm a huge fan of sushi." These phrases let the other person know that you're sharing a personal feeling, and they are free to have a different one. Here are some useful phrases for expressing your opinions. "I think," or "I believe." This is a great, all-purpose way to introduce your opinion. For example, "I think that new restaurant has the best pasta in town." "In my opinion." This is slightly more formal but very clear. "In my opinion, the city needs more public parks." "I feel that." This is good for opinions that are more emotional or personal. "I feel that social media has changed how we connect with people." From my perspective, this is a great way to present a different point of view in a professional or more serious conversation. "From my perspective, the new policy will create more work for our team." What about agreeing and disagreeing? When you agree with someone, you can use phrases like, "I agree completely," "Oh, source, that's exactly what I was thinking." "You've hit the nail on the head." This is a fun, idiomatic way to say you agree. When you disagree, it's even more important to be polite. Avoid saying, "You're wrong." Instead, use phrases that express a different view without invalidating theirs. "I see your point, but I'm not so sure about that. I think I understand where you're coming from, but I have a slightly different view." That's an interesting perspective. My take on it is, let's practice. Imagine someone says, "Action movies are so boring." Boras, if you disagree, instead of just saying, "No, they're not," you could say, "I can see why you'd say that, but I'm a huge fan of them. I love the special effects." This acknowledges their opinion while politely sharing your own. Now, let's talk about preferences, like what you like to do or what you like to eat. The key phrases here are often about liking or disliking things. I like, or I enjoy, to talk about things you like. I'm not a big fan of, or I don't really care for things you don't like. I prefer, when you're choosing between two things. Instead of saying, "I hate romantic comedies," you can say, "I'm not a big fan of romantic comedies. I usually prefer a good documentary." This sounds much friendlier and less aggressive. Last time, we learned how to politely express our opinions and preferences, and how to agree and disagree respectfully. Now, we're going to focus on an incredibly useful and practical skill: making plans and talking about the future. This is how you turn a friendly conversation into a social engagement. This is a skill that makes your English a tool for connection, not just communication. It's how you turn "it was nice to meet you" into "let's get coffee next week." The magic is in the transition. Let me tell you about a time I used this skill. I was talking with a colleague named Chris, and we were chatting about our weekend. He mentioned he loved hiking. I also enjoy hiking, so I immediately saw an opportunity. Instead of just saying, "Oh, that's cool," I said, I've been wanting to explore that new trail by the lake. Maybe we could go sometime." Chris's face lit up, and he said, "I'd love that. How about next Saturday?" Just like that, we had a plan. I moved from a casual conversation about a shared interest to a concrete plan for the future. So, how do we do this? It starts with listening for those hooks we talked about in the small talk episode. If someone says, "I'm so excited for the new movie coming out," you can seize that opportunity. You could say, "Oh, I've heard good things about that. Do you want to go see it together sometime?" Or if a friend says, "I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to try that new restaurant," you can respond with, "I know, me too. We should go check it out together soon." Let's talk about some key phrases for making plans. The most direct way is to use a question mark. To suggest an activity, you could ask, "Do you want to grab coffee sometime?" Or, "Would you like to go to the park this weekend?" Or, "How about we see that movie together?" These are great starting points. The key is to be a little bit vague at first, to give the other person an easy out if they're not interested or available. "Sometime" or "this weekend" are good for this. To talk about a specific time, you could ask, "Are you free on Friday evening?" Or, "How about next Tuesday after work?" Or, "Does Sunday morning work for you?" This is for when you're ready to get more specific. You're moving from the idea of a plan to the details of one. What if they can't make it? This is where you practice politeness. Don't take it personally. They might have a real reason. They might say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to work on Friday." A good response is, "No problem at all. Let me know when you're free." Or, "That's okay. We can try to find another time." This keeps the door open for future plans. What if they say yes? This is the fun part. Once they agree to a general idea, you can work out the details. You could say, "Great. What time works for you?" Or, "Perfect. Should we meet at the entrance?" Or, "Awesome. Let's talk more on WhatsApp to figure out the details." Now, let's look at talking about the future in a more general sense. This isn't about making a plan with someone right now, but rather talking about your own goals, dreams, and upcoming events. This shows that you're an ambitious and forward-thinking person, and it gives the other person more to connect with. You might hear questions like, "Do you have any plans for your vacation? What are you looking forward to this year? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" When you answer these, again, try to give a little more detail. Instead of just saying, "I'm going to travel," you could say, "I'm planning a trip to Italy. I'm really excited to see the historical sites and eat all the pasta." This makes your future plans sound real and exciting, and gives the other person a chance to ask more questions. Let's do a quick practice. You're talking to a friend and you mention you're hungry. They say, "I am too." What's a good way to suggest a plan? You could say, "There's a great taco place on the corner. Do you want to go grab a bite?" This is direct, specific, and easy for them to say yes or no to. We've come a long way. We've mastered greetings, small talk, and how to discuss everything from our jobs to our future plans. Now, we're going to tackle something that can feel a bit challenging, but is absolutely necessary for real life. How to navigate difficult conversations and express your needs. This includes asking for help, giving feedback, and resolving misunderstandings. This skill is about using English to solve a problem and protect your well-being. It's not about being rude, it's about being clear, assertive, and respectful. Let me tell you about a time I had a difficult conversation with a colleague. We were working on a big project, and I felt that my ideas weren't being heard. I knew I needed to say something, but I was worried about causing a problem. I decided to approach her gently and privately. I said, "Hi, Maria, do you have a few minutes to talk?" I wanted to share some thoughts on the project. When we sat down, I didn't say, "You're not listening to me." Instead, I used I statements, which focus on your own feelings and experiences. I said, "I feel a little bit left out of the creative process, and I would appreciate it if we could spend more time brainstorming together." Maria listened, and it turned out she hadn't even realized she was doing it because I was calm and specific. We were able to fix the problem and move forward. The key to all of these situations is to use polite and direct language. Let's break down a few common scenarios. When you are asking for help, you could say, "Could you possibly help me with something?" Or, "Would you mind taking a look at this for me when you have a moment?" Or, "I'm having a little trouble with this. Do you have any advice?" These phrases give the other person an easy way to say no if they're too busy, and they show that you value their time and expertise. When you are giving feedback or expressing a problem, this is where I statements are your best friend. They prevent the other person from feeling attacked and keep the conversation productive. Let's say a colleague is always late to meetings. Instead of, "You are always late," You could say, I've noticed that we've started a few meetings late, and I'm worried about staying on schedule. This focuses on your observation and your concern, not their actions. If a friend keeps canceling plans at the last minute, you could say, I feel disappointed when our plans are canceled so late because I was really looking forward to seeing you. This expresses your feelings clearly without blaming them. This is a skill you can practice with small things. For instance, if you're in a restaurant and your food is cold, you could politely say to the waiter, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but my food seems to be a bit cold." This is much more effective than getting angry. Sometimes you might realize there has been a misunderstanding. The best approach is to clarify the situation calmly. You might say, I think there might be a misunderstanding. What I meant to say was, or I'm sorry. I don't think I explained myself very well. Let me try again. Or, just to be clear, are we both talking about the same thing? These phrases show that you are trying to understand and solve the problem, rather than just arguing your point. The common thread in all of these situations is to be specific, calm, and respectful. Don't let your emotions take over. Focus on the facts and on your feelings, and always offer a solution if you can. This time, we're going to move to a much more enjoyable topic: how to tell stories and share experiences. This is where conversations truly come to life. Telling a good story isn't just about sharing information, it's about making your listener feel like they were right there with you. Think about a time you heard a great story. Maybe it was a friend recounting a funny travel mishap, or a family member telling a vivid tale from their childhood. You weren't just listening to words. You were feeling the emotions, seeing the pictures in your mind, and laughing or gasping at the right moments. That's the power of a good narrative. A few years ago, I was at a dinner party, and someone asked my friend, Liam, about his trip to Japan. Instead of just saying, "It was good," he started his story with, "I'll never forget the first time I saw Mount Fuji. Iwar." He then painted a picture for us: the early morning light, the mist over the lake, the sense of awe he felt. He wasn't just listing places he went, he was sharing a moment and an emotion. He used descriptive words and phrases like, "The air was crisp," and "It took my breath away." By the end of his story, we all felt like we had been there with him. So, how do we become better storytellers in English? It starts with a simple structure. Think of it as a 3-part journey: a beginning, a middle, and an end. A great story starts with a clear beginning that hooks your listener. You need to give them the who, what, where, and when. You can start with, "I remember a few years ago," or "The funniest thing happened to me last week," or "Once when I was traveling in." This immediately signals that you're about to tell a story and gives them some context. Instead of just saying, "I got lost," you could start with, "I got lost when I was in London last year." This gives your listener the setting and makes the story more personal. The middle is the main part of your story. This is where you add the details that make it feel real. Don't be afraid to use descriptive adjectives and adverbs. You should describe what you saw, what you felt, and use dialogue if you can. The key here is to keep it moving. Don't get stuck on one detail for too long. Lead your listener through the experience. Every story needs a good ending. This is where you wrap things up and explain the point of the story. You could say, and that's how I ended up. Or, in the end, it was a valuable lesson about, or, and to this day, I still think about. If it's a funny story, this is where you deliver the punchline. If it's a serious story, this is where you share the lesson you learned. Let's practice with a simple scenario. Imagine you went to a concert and want to tell a friend about it. Instead of just saying, "The concert was great," try using our storytelling structure. "You won't believe how crazy the concert was last night. The band came out and the crowd went wild. The lead singer was wearing this incredible, sparkling jacket, and the music was so loud you could feel it in your chest. I was right in the front row, singing along to every song. By the time it was over, my voice was gone, but it was one of the best nights of my life." So, see how much more engaging that is? You've taken your listener on a journey with you. The more you practice this, the more naturally it will come. Now, we're going to tackle a very modern and essential topic: how to talk about technology and social media. Our lives are deeply intertwined with the digital world, so knowing how to discuss it in English is crucial for any conversation. Think about how often you talk about this stuff. You might complain about your Wi-Fi, recommend a new app, or discuss a viral video with a friend. These conversations are happening every day, and they have a language all their own. A few months ago, I was chatting with a friend from another country. She was trying to explain that her phone's battery was draining too quickly. Instead of just saying, "My phone battery is bad," she said, "My phone's battery life is terrible. I have to charge it 3 times a day." This simple, descriptive sentence helped me understand her problem immediately. She also used phrases like, "It's running out of juice," to talk about the battery dying, which is a great, informal way to describe it. So let's break down some common vocabulary and phrases you can use. When you're talking about your phone, you might say, "My phone is running slow," which means it's not working quickly. You could also say, "I need to free up some storage on my phone," or "I dropped my phone and cracked the screen." You might also say, "I'm trying to update my phone's software." For computers or laptops, you can use phrases like, "My laptop crashed and I lost all my work," or "The Wi-Fi isn't working," which is a universal complaint. You could also say, "I'm downloading a new program," or "The website isn't loading properly." These phrases are direct and get straight to the point. They are the building blocks of any conversation about tech problems or solutions. Social media has its own vocabulary, and it's always changing. It's important to know the basics. You can talk about what's popular or trending. You might say, "Did you see that video? It went viral overnight." This means something that becomes very popular very quickly. You could also say, "This song is trending on TikTok right now," or "I saw a great meme about that," which is an image or video that is shared widely and often humorous. To talk about your own activity on social media, you can say, "I posted a photo on Instagram," or "I just scrolled through my feed," which means looking at new posts. You might also say, "He has a lot of followers," or "I need to take a break from social media." If a friend is looking for something, you can be helpful by recommending a specific app, website, or gadget. You might say, "You should download this app. It's really useful for learning languages." Or, "I highly recommend this website for cheap flights." Or, "This new phone has an amazing camera." Let's do a quick practice. Imagine a friend tells you they're bored. You could say, "Have you seen that new show on Netflix? It's been all over my social media feed." This connects a specific recommendation to your own experience, making the conversation more personal. The key to all of this is to not be intimidated by the jargon. Start with simple, clear sentences and build from there. The more you use these phrases, the more naturally it will come. We've learned everything from the basics of greeting someone to the complexities of sharing your opinions and telling stories. Now, we're going to wrap it all up with a very important skill that will leave a lasting positive impression: how to express gratitude and give compliments. This is the art of ending a conversation on a high note. Saying thank you and giving a genuine compliment shows that you've been listening, that you value the other person, and that you're a kind and appreciative individual. It's a wonderful way to build and strengthen relationships. I'll never forget a time when a new team member, who was a little shy, came up to me after a project was finished. She said, "Sophia, I just wanted to say thank you for your help. Your explanation of the software was so clear, and I really learned a lot from you." It was such a small thing, but it meant a lot to me. She didn't just say a generic thanks. She was specific, and she focused on something I had done well. That specific compliment made me feel seen and appreciated. So let's learn how to do that. Saying thank you is more than just a two-word phrase. You can make it more powerful and sincere by being specific. For a favor or help, instead of just thanks, you could say, "Thank you so much for your help with the presentation. I couldn't have done it without you." Or, "I really appreciate you taking the time to explain that to me." Or, "That was incredibly kind of you. Thank you." The key is to mention exactly what you're thankful for. This shows you are paying attention, and it makes the thank you feel more personal. When someone gives you a gift, you might say, "Thank you so much. It's exactly what I needed." Or, "This is so thoughtful of you. I love it." Or, "You didn't have to, but thank you. This is wonderful." A good compliment is specific and sincere. It can be about a person's appearance, their work, or their personality. You could compliment their work or skills by saying, "That was a great presentation. Your points were so well organized and easy to follow." Or, "You have a really creative way of solving problems." Or, "I was so impressed with how you handled that difficult situation." These compliments show that you admire their abilities and respect them professionally. You could compliment their personal qualities or appearance by saying, "I always enjoy talking to you. You have a great sense of humor." Or, "That color looks fantastic on you." Or, "You have a very calming presence. It's nice to be around you." Be careful with compliments about appearance to make sure they are respectful and appropriate for the context. When you receive a compliment, don't just brush it off. Accept it gracefully with a simple thank you. You can even add a little detail like, "Thank you so much. I really enjoy working on this project." This shows that you appreciate their words and it keeps the conversation positive. Finally, let's look at how to end a conversation politely. When you're ready to leave, you can use phrases that signal the conversation is coming to a close. You could say, "Well, it was great talking to you." Or, "I should get going, but it was lovely to see you." Or, "Thanks for the chat. I'll talk to you later." Or, "Have a great rest of your day or evening." These phrases are friendly and give a clear signal that you're about to leave, avoiding an awkward or abrupt ending. And that brings us to the end of our series. I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey. My hope is that you now feel more confident and equipped to engage in everyday conversations in English, turning simple words into meaningful connections. Thank you for listening to the Best English Podcast. Until next time, keep practicing and keep connecting.